imagine for a second that you have just been through like a completely devastating breakup.
Oh man, the worst.
Right. The woman you thought you were going to marry just leaves you. And she doesn't just leave you, she leaves you for someone significantly wealthier.
Yeah, that is a gut punch.
Exactly. For a lot of guys, that's the cue to just spiral. You know, you hit the bar, you isolate yourself, you just kind of let your life fall apart.
It's the default reaction for a lot of people, yeah.
But what if, instead of spiraling, you took all of that raw, just agonizing energy, all of that desperation, and you precisely calculated the amount of time you would have spent trying to win her back?
Wait, like actually did the math.
Yeah, exactly. Let's call it, I don't know, 137 hours.
Yeah.
And what if you poured every single one of those hours into building homemade agricultural drones in your tiny dormitory?
I mean, it sounds like the origin story of a comic book villain or, maybe a modern industrial titan.
Yeah.
And according to the author we are diving into today, that's actually the exact mechanism that has driven human civilization forward since, well, the dawn of time.
Exactly. So before we get into this incredible story, I want to welcome everyone to today's deep dive.
Glad you're here with us.
Yeah, if you're looking for a shortcut to understanding the forces shaping modern masculinity, you are in the right place. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us out.
Definitely.
Because today we are reviewing a highly controversial, unapologetically raw new ebook that is just absolutely setting the manosphere and men's rights activist spaces on fire.
Oh, is genuinely causing shockwaves. I mean, we're talking about a text that does not hold back at all.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah, and it's sparking these intense, sometimes really vicious debates everywhere you look, from podcasts to online forums.
The book is called Master the Future, Dominate Your Life with Foresight by Conrad Riker. It came out in 2025.
Fresh off the digital presses.
Right. Now, here is the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to unpack Riker's highly specific, very intense worldview.
And it is intense.
Extremely. So Riker argues that our core institutions, meaning marriage, the legal system, corporate HR, the education system, and of course mainstream media, have been systematically captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
Yeah, and he claims the explicit design of these captured institutions is to, well, suppress traditional masculinity.
And we need to be very clear about our goal here today for you listening. Our goal is strict, impartial analysis.
Exactly. We are just the messengers here.
Right. We're going to dissect Riker's historical analogies, his biological claims, and the very specific, almost militant survival strategies he lays out for men.
Yeah, we aren't here to endorse these views, and we aren't here to condemn them either.
We are here to strictly analyze the fascinating, highly provocative ideas contained in this text because, whether you agree with him or not, Riker is articulating something that millions of men are currently feeling.
He's definitely tapped into a massive cultural nerve.
For sure. And trust me, we are only going to be able to scratch the surface of this text today.
It is dense.
Very. If you want the full war manual, you need to check out Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books right now to buy the book.
Highly recommended if you want the unfiltered version.
Yeah, and you also need to follow the author at Conrad N. Riker on Substack.
That's right.
So we're about to go on an ultra-long, incisive exploration of how to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured and how to navigate them now, according to Riker. If you're a guy trying to make sense of the modern world, buckle up.
Yeah, it's a dense, unapologetic text. And to truly understand Riker's worldview, you really have to start where he starts.
Which is?
You have to start with the foundational premise that informs, every single argument in the book.
Yeah.
And that's biology.
Right. Okay, so let's go back to that guy building drones in his dorm room.
Let's do it.
Riker opens the book with the story of Li Wei. He was a factory worker in Shenzhen, China. And just like I mentioned in the intro, his girlfriend leaves him for a wealthier suitor. Li Wei redirects exactly 4,137 hours of what Riker terms would-be courtship effort into engineering.
Just channeling all that rejection into raw productivity.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few years, and Li Wei's startup is dominating Southeast Asia's agricultural drone market.
See, Riker uses this specific anecdote to illustrate a broader biological calculus.
Right, he isn't just telling a, motivational story about a guy getting over a breakup.
No, not at all. He's making a profound claim about the nature of human progress. According to Riker, civilization itself is driven by raw, biological male imperatives.
Specifically the imperative to compete, right?
Yeah, to compete, to conquer, and to secure resources to attract mates.
And he brings receipts to back this up. I mean, he cites the study from Tsinghua University, which is basically, the MIT of China.
Oh, a powerhouse institution.
Right. And the study shows that Chinese provinces with extreme male surpluses produce 300% more tech patents per capita than regions where the gender ratio is balanced.
Which is an astonishing statistic when you stop to think about it. 300%.
It's massive.
Yeah, and Riker claims this isn't just an economic quirk of the Chinese market. He calls this Mother Nature's cruel math.
Cruel math. I like that phrasing.
Right. When you have a massive surplus of men, the competition for mates becomes, well, hyper lethal.
Because there literally aren't enough women to go around.
Exactly. The men who are at the bottom of the social or economic hierarchy face a very real, very pressing evolutionary threat of being completely bred out of existence.
So out of that pure biological desperation, they innovate, they build.
Yeah, they create new technologies.
Yeah.
Riker is essentially arguing that desperate men competing for status and access to women are actually civilization's greatest engine of innovation.
Wow. And what's fascinating here is how Riker scales this biological argument up. He doesn't just apply it to, hungry factory workers in Shenzhen.
No, he goes straight to the top.
Yeah, he applies it to the absolute highest echelons of corporate power. Like, take his analysis of Jeff Bezos.
Oh, this part blew my mind when I read it.
Right. When Bezos got divorced, he famously sacrificed roughly $38 billion in his settlement with Mackenzie Scott.
$38 billion.
Yeah. For most people, losing $38 billion sounds like an apocalyptic defeat.
But Riker frames it completely differently. He calls Bezos' divorce an optimization.
An optimization. Explain that for us.
Well, Bezos surrendered a massive chunk of personal wealth, yes. But look at what he kept.
That company.
He kept the voting rights. He kept the control of Amazon. He kept the empire-building infrastructure completely intact.
Right. He gave up the spoils, but he kept the mechanism of conquest.
Exactly. Riker argues this perfectly mirrors an alpha resource allocation strategy.
Interesting.
Yeah. The biological drive of an apex male isn't just about hoarding cash in a vault somewhere. It's about maintaining power, maintaining the ability to build, to dominate a market, to project influence.
So Bezos optimized for power over capital.
Exactly. And Riker connects that relentless drive directly to biochemistry. He spends a lot of time talking about Wall Street.
Which is traditionally viewed as like the ultimate hyper-competitive male environment.
Right. And he cites a 2008 Harvard study conducted by a researcher named John Coates.
Okay, what did Coates find?
This study looked at trading floors and found that high testosterone traders actually made 40% more profit during market rallies than their lower testosterone peers.
40%, that's a huge margin.
Yeah, Coates' research is foundational to Riker's argument here. Coates actually found that a trader's testosterone levels in the morning could actively predict their profitability for the rest of the day.
That is wild.
So Riker looks at this data and makes a very bold philosophical leap. He basically says, look, testosterone is not merely a hormone.
What is then?
It is a financial instrument. It is the actual tangible asset that generates alpha in the markets.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is a crazy claim. So if we look at testosterone in Riker's view, it's like a highly volatile fuel source.
Yeah, exactly.
Think of it like a nuclear reactor. If you harness it correctly, it can power entire cities, it can build empires, it can conquer markets, it can push humanity to Mars.
Yes.
But if it goes unchecked, it can cause a meltdown. The problem, according to Riker, is that modern HR departments look at this nuclear reactor and they don't just want to install safety rods.
No, they want to drain the coolant entirely.
Right. They want to shut down the core, and then they stand around wondering why the power grid is failing.
That is a perfect encapsulation of his critique of modern corporate culture. Riker argues that modern institutions actively try to suppress this exact biological drive because it is inherently disruptive.
And competitive.
And unequal, yes. And he illustrates this with a, frankly, hilarious but very telling anecdote about Goldman Sachs.
Oh, the cologne ban.
Yes, the 2010 Goldman Sachs cologne ban.
So,
according to Riker's account, Goldman Sachs allegedly banned cologne on the trading floor.
why? Were people allergic?
No, because traders were secretly dousing themselves in pheromone sprays to gain an aggressive psychological edge over their competitors and clients.
Wait, really? Pheromone spray?
That's the claim. And Riker claims that following this ban on pheromones and aggressive olfactory posturing, Goldman saw a 22% drop in their Q3 profits.
I mean, whether that correlation is direct causation is highly debatable.
Well, for sure. But Riker uses it to hammer home a specific point.
Which is?
His takeaway is that when you tamper with a man's competitive chemical edge, when you try to sanitize the biological reality of male competition to make the workplace more, inclusive or comfortable, you are inevitably left counting losses instead of profits.
Wow.
Yeah, he argues that biology simply does not negotiate with human resources policies.
But, okay, let me play devil's advocate here, using Riker's own logic.
Go for it.
If corporate wokeness, or what he calls inverted dominance, is so destructive to the bottom line, how does he explain the reality that we live in?
What do you mean?
Well, we have massive companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, that heavily enforce these exact ESG metrics, diversity quotas, and HR policies, right?
Right.
And yet they are printing trillions of dollars. If HR is draining the nuclear reactor, why are the lights still on?
It's a crucial question, and Riker actually anticipates it in the book.
Okay, what's his answer?
His answer is essentially that these massive corporations succeed in spite of those policies, not because of them.
Ah, I see.
He argues they are coasting on the massive momentum of the relentless male drive that originally built them.
So, like, the founders built the momentum and now they're just gliding.
Exactly. A company like Google was built by hyper-competitive, obsessive engineers. Now that they have a functional monopoly, they can afford to implement what Riker views as parasitic HR ideologies.
He actually points out that if you look past the public relations layer, like past the sensitivity training and the ESG reports, the underlying engine is still biological dominance.
Yep. He notes that Fortune 500 CEOs still average 15% higher testosterone than median males.
So the PR department might speak the language of equity, but the C-suite still operates on the ruthless mechanics of apex male competition.
And Riker paints a really stark dystopian picture of what happens when a society completely embraces that sanitization at a national level.
No, like when a country decides to prioritize absolute comfort and safety over competition and risk.
Yes. He points to Sweden as his prime historical and contemporary example of devolution.
Yeah, the Sweden chapter is brutal.
It really is.
He highlights this crazy story about SEAL Team 6. Apparently, SEAL Team 6 used to conduct joint training exercises with Swedish special forces.
Right.
And before these intense, high-risk missions, they would do these roaring, primal Viking chants to get the adrenaline pumping.
Getting psyched up for war, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But then, according to Riker, bureaucrats in Malmo intervene. They banned the chanting practice, explicitly labeling it as an expression of toxic masculinity.
Wow. And Riker uses that to pivot to the broader Swedish society. He throws out this statistic that 68% of Swedish males under the age of 30 still live with their parents.
68%.
Yeah, he claims they are heavily taxed to fund a massive welfare state that essentially pacifies them from cradle to grave. He says this system turns, quote, lions into house cats.
Lions into house cats. This brings us to a major theoretical framework in the book, right? What Riker calls the Fjord de Sofa pipeline.
That's right. He argues that safetyism, the political and cultural obsession with eliminating all risk and discomfort, actually physically addicts men to comfort.
It's like a societal level dopamine hack.
Exactly. When a society, like Sweden's robust welfare state, completely guarantees your survival, your housing, your healthcare, and your comfort, regardless of your effort, it inadvertently breeds out the exact primal drive that built the society in the first place.
Because there's no struggle.
Right. Riker poses a philosophical question to the reader. Why would a man cross an ocean, raid a village, or endure the agony of building a company when the state subsidizes his existence and actively shames his aggression?
He views state-sanctioned comfort as an evolutionary dead end for masculinity.
Yes, entirely.
Okay, so if biology drives men to conquer, to build, to accumulate resources, Riker argues that modern legal institutions are the primary tools used by this captured system to strip men of those spoils.
Yes. If the corporate HR department neutralizes you at work, the family court neutralizes you at home.
And that brings us to the second major section of his analysis, which he aggressively titles The Marriage Plantation and Financial Castration.
This is where Riker transitions from corporate biology to family law. And his critique here is absolutely blistering.
Blistering is a good word for it.
If you thought his take on HR was intense, his take on...
He really doesn't mince words. He cites U.S. Census Bureau statistics stating that 90% of alimony payers are men. 90%.
And for Riker, this isn't a statistical anomaly, It is evidence of a system operating exactly as it was designed by feminist ideologies.
To make this visceral, he relies on some truly harrowing anecdotes.
Well, yeah.
Like he talks about a man in Tampa, just a guy who worked a normal middle-class job who literally has to sell his blood plasma twice a week just to meet his court-ordered alimony payments.
That is just bleak.
It is. Payments that are, according to Riker, directly funding his ex-wife's Pilates instructor and lifestyle.
And then there's the story of Lars. Lars was an electrician in Sweden.
Oh, Lars. I remember this part.
He spent 20 years building a thriving, highly profitable HVAC business. He goes through a divorce, and the Swedish courts mandate lifetime alimony based on his potential highest earning capacity.
Right, they didn't just look at what he was making at the time, they looked at what the business could make and tethered him to that number indefinitely.
So what does Lars do?
He completely dissolves the business, doesn't he?
He does. He fires his employees, liquidates his trucks, and just walks away from 20 years of labor.
Why?
Because Lars decided he would rather shut down his life's work and live modestly than work 80-hour weeks, so his ex-wife's new boyfriend could drive the Audi that Lars was forced to finance.
Riker uses Lars as a prime example of what happens when the legal system pushes male builders past the breaking point.
They simply stopped building.
Yeah. And Riker attempts to quantify this systemic bias with a formula he introduces called the alimony calculus.
This is pure Riker right here.
Totally. He defines the alimony calculus mathematically as her lifestyle inflation divided by your dignity squared.
It's a cynical, highly effective way to frame his argument.
Very effective for his audience, yeah.
He contrasts different legal jurisdictions to prove his point. For instance, he looks at California's family court system, which he directly compares to feudal serfdom.
Feudal serfdom, like peasants and lords.
Exactly, where the man is a peasant working the land to pay tithes to a lord he no longer serves.
But he contrasts California with Alaska.
Right.
He actually praises the Alaskan legal system, noting that their courts generally do not award long-term or lifetime spousal support. They believe in clean breaks.
Yeah, Riker jokes that Alaska's state motto shouldn't be north to the future. It should be no alimony, just eagles.
Just eagles. That's hilarious. But Riker doesn't just attack the back end of marriage, the divorce part. He goes after the front end, the wedding industry itself.
He argues that the trap begins the moment a man proposes.
He tells the story of Rajesh Patel, an engineer who paid a $200,000 dowry for an arranged marriage within his cultural community, only to be treated with utter contempt by his new in-laws and wife.
And he couples that extreme example with mainstream American data. He pulls a Federal Reserve report showing that 73% of American grooms go into consumer debt to finance their weddings.
73%? That's insane.
This is where Riker breaks down the brutal math of the modern marriage contract. He cites CDC data indicating the median marriage in America lasts about 8.2 years.
Wow, 8.2 years.
Meanwhile, the average wedding costs roughly $30,000.
So Riker runs the numbers. He calculates that if you finance a $30,000 wedding for a marriage that lasts 8.2 years, and then you lose half your assets in the divorce, you are effectively paying $3,658 annually for the eventual privilege of having your wealth extracted.
And he brings in a fascinating historical perspective here.
Oh yeah, about dowries.
Right. Riker points out that historically, in many cultures, dowries involved the bride's family paying the groom's family to take on the financial burden of providing for her.
Today, he argues, the trap has been completely flipped.
Yes, the man finances the lavish wedding, assumes all the financial risk, and is legally penalized if the contract is dissolved.
Which brings him to arguably the most famous modern example of a man navigating this hostile legal terrain, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial.
Oh, this was a massive cultural moment.
Huge. Riker dedicates a significant portion of this section to analyzing that trial, framing it as an absolute masterclass in survival for the modern man.
This is a crucial pivot in Riker's thesis. He sets the stage by citing data from the National District Attorneys Association, claiming that 82% of false domestic violence claims target men.
82%.
Yeah. Riker's premise is that the traditional legal system and the legacy media are inherently gynocentric, meaning they automatically default to believing the woman and condemning the man.
So how did Depp win, in Riker's view?
Well, according to Riker, Depp didn't win because the Virginia court system is inherently fair or unbiased.
Right.
He won because his legal team executed a brilliant bypass of the entire legacy system. They weaponized Gen Z's BS detector.
Okay, that's interesting.
Exactly. Riker argues that Depp's team turned the trial into meme warfare.
By broadcasting it live, right?
Yes. By broadcasting the trial live, they allow the internet, specifically TikTok creators, YouTubers, and independent commentators, to analyze the evidence in real time.
They bypass the New York Times and CNN and appeal directly to the public's intuition.
Riker views this as a blueprint for men. When the institutions are captured, you have to take your case to the decentralized public square.
Okay, I have to pause here and really push back on Riker's overarching logic in this section.
Let's hear it.
Because I'm looking at a statistic that Riker himself includes in the text, almost as an aside. He notes that 68% of divorced men remarry within 5 years.
Yes, that is a very jarring statistic given everything we've just discussed.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? If marriage is this rigged slaughterhouse, if it's a plantation designed to financially castrate men, why on earth do almost 70% of men who escape the trap willingly walk right back into it a few years later?
It's a huge paradox.
Doesn't that completely undermine his argument that men are waking up to this reality?
It is a glaring paradox for sure, but it's one that Riker addresses by looping right back to his foundational biological premise.
Which is?
Why do they go back? Because, Riker says, men are inherent builders. It is hardwired into their DNA to build families, to build legacies, to protect and provide.
I see.
You can burn a builder's house down, but his instinct is to pick up a hammer and start again. They simply refuse to stay down.
So he acknowledges the biological urge to marry and build a family is almost impossible to override.
He does. But what he strongly advocates for is mitigating the extreme legal risks associated with that biological urge.
He doesn't just say, never get married.
Right. He provides a highly tactical, cynical guide on how to do it if you absolutely must.
Yeah. He lays out what he calls risk mitigation strategies, and they are, honestly, they're wild.
Very unconventional.
He advocates for things like going to Nevada, drive through chapels to ensure the wedding costs remain utterly negligible. Basically, do not go into debt for a party.
He also proposes the ring to regret ratio.
The ring to regret ratio. Explain that one.
This is a rule where he advises men to calculate the carat size of the diamond ring the woman is demanding, and if that number exceeds some arbitrary fraction of their combined credit scores, you abort the mission.
That's hilarious.
It's tongue-in-cheek, yeah. But the underlying point is serious. Do not marry a woman whose primary focus is the extraction of a status symbol.
And then he introduces the prenup potluck doctrine.
Yes. This is Riker's negotiation strategy for prenuptial agreements.
Okay, what's a prenup potluck?
He says that when you sit down at the table, either she signs a totally fair, ironclad contract that protects your premarital assets and caps alimony, or she brings the tuna casserole to the negotiation table.
Or tuna casserole.
Yeah, meaning she offers you something of tangible, nurturing value to offset the financial risk you are taking.
Wow.
Riker believes the modern legal structure is so profoundly hostile that men must approach marriage with the cold, detached calculus of a hostile corporate merger.
Which leads us perfectly into his next major target. If the courts are the slaughterhouse, the schools and the media are the indoctrination camps.
A heavy metaphor, but yeah.
From the courtroom, Riker moves to how institutions capture the minds of boys before they ever even become men. Section 3 of our deep dive outlines his argument that the education system and modern media are run by Marxist and feminist ideologies that literally criminalize the basic tenets of boyhood.
This is where Riker attempts to diagnose the systemic root of the problem. If men are struggling in the corporate world and the courts, where did it begin?
Right.
He starts with the primary education system, highlighting a concept he terms empathy grading.
Empathy grading, what does that look like in practice?
He cites a highly controversial 2021 study from the University of Georgia.
Okay.
The researchers look at how teachers grade students, and they found that female teachers systematically graded boys 10% lower than girls for the exact same quality of work, specifically in subjects requiring subjective evaluation, like reading and writing.
Wait, really? The exact same work?
Yeah.
Why? Did the study explain the bias?
Well, according to Riker's interpretation of the data, the teachers weren't grading the academic output, they were grading the behavior.
I see.
Girls naturally sit still, follow instructions, and exhibit what Riker calls estrogen-aligned behaviors, like nurturing, compliance, and emotional verbosity. These behaviors are rewarded.
And boys?
Boys, on the other hand, exhibit testosterone-driven traits like physical restlessness, aggressive competition, and concise, sometimes blunt problem-solving.
And Riker points out that these traits are no longer accommodated. Instead, they are pathologized.
Exactly.
If a boy can't sit still for 8 hours straight, he isn't treated as a boy with natural energy. He's diagnosed with ADHD and medicated. If he's aggressive on the playground, it's labeled toxic masculinity.
To prove that male cognitive ability hasn't degraded, he points to objective, ungradable metrics.
Like math.
Yeah, he notes that the boys absolutely dominate the International STEM Olympiad medals, taking roughly 78% of them globally.
Wow, 78%.
In pure mathematics and physics, where the answer is either objectively right or wrong, and empathy doesn't matter, boys excel. But they severely trail girls in liberal arts GPAs, which Riker argues is entirely subjective and biased against them.
So the boys who survive this primary education system eventually make it to college. And this is where Riker escalates his critique, taking dead aim at the university level, specifically attacking Title IX's tribunals.
Riker does not view Title IX as a civil rights protection. He refers to Title IX's campus courts as a star chamber.
For the listener who might not know, a star chamber refers to an arbitrary, secretive court with no due process. And the data Riker pulls to support this is just chilling for any guy stepping onto a college campus.
It really is. He pulls data from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, a prominent civil liberties group.
Right.
The FIRE data shows that in these campus Title IX tribunals, 93% of accusations against men end in expulsion.
93%.
Yeah.
And Riker highlights the procedural nightmare of this. Unlike a real court of law, where you are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, these campus courts often operate on a preponderance of evidence standard, which basically means 50.1% likely.
It's a much lower bar.
Way lower. And often there's virtually no standard of physical evidence required.
Furthermore, Riker notes the catastrophic asymmetry in the consequences. 60% of the men who are accused lose their academic scholarships, their reputations, and their futures.
And what happens to false accusers?
0% of false accusers, women who are demonstrably proven to have fabricated a claim, ever face perjury charges or expulsion themselves.
That's crazy.
The system, Riker argues, is completely rigged to presume male guilt. He quotes the famous legal scholar Alan Dershowitz, who said regarding these campus tribunals, men are guilty, they're pre-guilty.
Pre-guilty. And Riker argues that the systemic institutional bias from the third-grade teacher docking points for fidgeting to the college tribunal assuming guilt takes a devastating psychological toll on young men.
It's a profound demoralization for sure.
Yeah.
He points to a Harvard study that examined the psychological impact of the phrase toxic masculinity. The study showed that when men are shown videos discussing the concept of toxic masculinity in a modern context, it actually causes a 50% spike in feelings of hopelessness and depression among those men.
Which makes total sense. Think about it.
How so?
Well, if you are a young guy and every institution, your school, your university, the media is constantly telling you that your default biological setting is defective, dangerous, and toxic, it crushes your drive.
Riker argues that this is the explicit goal. If you tell half the population they are defective by design, you neutralize them as a threat to the established power structure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the shift here. Riker compares the modern education system to a factory.
Okay, a factory.
In the 1950s, this factory produced men who took shop class, learned how to weld, rebuilt car engines, went on to build their own houses, and eventually put a man on the moon. Today, Riker says, this new factory is designed to produce compliant TikTok e-boys. Boys who are culturally trained to apologize for their male gaze during a math test.
This raises a really important point about the language we use, which Riker addresses head on. How did we get here?
Yeah, how did the language change?
He breaks down what he calls the woke lexicon. He views modern social justice language as a linguistic shell game where masculinity always, inevitably, loses.
Let's break that down because it's fascinating.
So in this lexicon, when society says toxic masculinity, what they really mean is stop being manly.
Okay.
They want you to stop being aggressive, competitive, and stoic. But Riker points out, if a man actually does what they ask, if he shows intense emotion, if he cries, if he becomes deeply vulnerable, society recoils.
Right.
Suddenly, male vulnerability is viewed as burdensome or weak, which translates to stop being manly differently.
That's a catch-22. You're toxic if you're stoic. You're pathetic if you're emotional.
Exactly. Riker views this not as an accident, but as a deliberate strategy of linguistic entrapment designed to keep men constantly off balance and apologetic for their existence.
He also points out the massive, glaring hypocrisy regarding the concept of male privilege.
Now, this is a strong point.
We hear constantly about the patriarchy and how society is built to benefit men, but Riker hammers home a very dark reality. Men account for 95% of all workplace fatalities.
95%.
They are the ones suffocating in mining collapses. They're the ones burning on oil rigs. They're the ones falling from high-rise construction sites to build the cities we all live in comfortably.
Yeah.
Riker asks a very poignant question. Where exactly is the privilege when your coffin is draped in a flag and your kids are fatherless because you died doing the dirty, dangerous work society demands of men?
To contextualize this massive cultural shift away from respecting men, Riker draws a fascinating historical parallel. He goes back to the Roman Empire, specifically the reign of the Emperor Elagabalus in the early 3rd century.
I love when these books dive into ancient Rome. What's the connection?
Well, according to Riker's historical framing, Elagabalus was a radically progressive emperor who essentially turned the imperial palace into an ancient gender studies lab.
A gender studies lab in ancient Rome.
Yeah. He famously demanded that his courtiers address him as lady rather than emperor, and he actively mocked the stoic, militaristic virtues that had built Rome.
And what was the result?
Disintegration. Riker notes that during Elagabalus's reign, the systemic ridiculing of traditional Roman masculinity led to a 40% drop in legion recruitment.
40%.
The hardened men of the frontier simply refused to fight and die for an empire that mocked her core identity. The Praetorian Guard eventually assassinated him.
Wow.
Riker argues that the exact same demoralization is happening today in the West. When you mock the men who build and protect the society, they quietly withdraw their labor and their lives, leading to the eventual fall of the empire.
And we see this exact demoralization reflected in our modern entertainment, which is the ultimate reflection of a culture's values. Riker dedicates a whole chapter to this, coining the term simpflix to describe modern media castration.
Yes, his analysis of Hollywood is brutal. He contrasts two massive cultural properties to prove his point. First, he looks at the absolute failure of Amazon's billion-dollar Lord of the Rings adaptation, The Rings of Power.
Oh man, the fans hated that show.
And Riker explains why. He says Amazon took Galadriel, a wise, ethereal, feminine archetype, and rewrote her as an aggressive, lecturing, sword-swinging girl boss, which the fans mockingly dubbed Feminimes.
Right.
Amazon tried to map masculine tropes onto a female character while making all the male characters around her look incompetent, weak, or deceitful.
Right.
The audience rejected it completely.
But contrast that with the show Riker claims is the true cultural zeitgeist, Yellowstone.
Exactly. Yellowstone is a $200 million juggernaut. Why did it succeed? Riker argues it succeeded because it shows unapologetic men like the character Rip Wheeler solving complex, violent problems with extreme resolve, loyalty, and stoicism.
Meanwhile, Riker claims Disney is pumping out emasculated cartoon boys who always need to be saved by hyper-competent female protagonists.
Yeah, but he says the massive, enduring box office success of movies like Joker, the John Wick franchise, and the cultural reverence for movies like Gladiator prove a fundamental truth.
That men and society at large are starving for traditional archetypes.
Yes, they want legends who suffer and overcome. They do not want HR-approved hashtags.
So, having mapped out how the corporate world neutralizes men, how the courts plunder them, how the schools medicate them, and how the media mocks them, Riker pivots to the interpersonal battlefield.
Right, the dating world.
He asks, in this hostile environment, how do men actually navigate the brutally real, modern, digital dating market?
This brings us to section 4 of our deep dive. This is where Riker dives deep into the concept of hypergamy and the realities of the digital sexual marketplace.
We need to define hypergamy clearly, because it is central to Riker's entire worldview.
Yeah, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, hypergamy is the concept that women naturally seek to mate across and up the dominance hierarchy.
Okay, across and up.
Because women bear the biological cost of pregnancy, they are wired to select men who can provide superior resources, protection, and status. Men mate indiscriminately, women mate selectively.
And Riker argues that while hypergamy has always existed, the digital age, specifically social media and dating apps, has put it on steroids.
He starts with a provocative 2022 Kinsey Institute statistic to set the stage. The study found that 68% of women in stable, long-term relationships admit to actively fantasizing about ex-lovers or other men.
Wow, 68%.
Riker uses this to claim that male value is never static. It is constantly being assessed, reassessed, and compared to a global roster of potential replacements.
He introduces this terrifying concept called digital dimorphism.
Digital dimorphism.
It's the idea that the digital avatar of a person has become more important than the physical reality of the person. He cites an MIT study from 2021 that proved this. Researchers found that women rate men on Instagram as 30% hotter than their identical real-life dating profiles on apps like Tinder or Hinge.
Why? Because Instagram provides context. It shows followers, lifestyle, lighting, and social proof.
Add to that, Pew Research data showing that a staggering 41% of Gen Z women actually prefer a man with high Instagram clout over a man with a high, quiet salary.
Riker uses the anecdote of the Captain Inflatable paddleboard con
On-
to illustrate how insane this has gotten.
Oh, this story's wild.
This story perfectly captures the modern absurdity. A guy creates a fake lavish lifestyle on social media. He uses rented Lamborghinis, fake yacht photos, and strategically angled pictures on cheap inflatable paddleboards to make it look like he's in the Maldives.
And it completely works.
It works. He attracts incredibly beautiful, high-status women.
Riker's point here is that in the digital sexual marketplace, perception absolutely trumps paychecks. Our brains evolved in small tribes of 150 people. If a guy in your tribe had a big hut and a lot of meat, he was wealthy. Our brains have not evolved to detect that the Lamborghini in the photo is rented for $400 a day.
So a man with a rented Lambo and 10K fake followers fundamentally outranks a quiet, stable engineer with a $200,000 salary and a robust 401k in the algorithm's eyes.
Because the algorithm, and by extension the modern mating market, only respects visible clout. He points to the meteoric rise of figures like Andrew Tate as the inevitable biological reaction to this rigged game.
Right, Riker references Tate's famous Bugatti speech, "What color is your Bugatti?" and the insane, unprecedented growth of Hustlers University, which hit 100,000 paying members in just 6 months.
Riker argues that young men are flocking to these highly polarizing, hyper-masculine figures as a total rejection of the mainstream path.
Yeah, they're rejecting antidepressants and modern talk therapy, which simply tell them to talk about their feelings and accept their mediocre lot in life.
Riker is arguing that these young men aren't stupid. They realize the game is rigged against them. The courts hate them, the schools hate them, the dating apps render them invisible.
So they're seeking hard, unfiltered, ruthless strategies to increase their market value by any means necessary.
And a core part of that internal strategy before you even get to the Lamborghinis is what Riker calls dopamine austerity.
This is where he gets into the no-fap movement and semen retention, right?
Yes. He points to a massive NoFap survey showing that 78% of men who quit internet pornography for 90 days report massive, life-altering spikes in personal discipline, energy, and focus.
He ties that to a 2022 study claiming men who actively practice semen retention earned 30% more income over a 5-year period.
30% more.
Yeah, Riker's argument is that sexual energy is the most potent biological force a man has. It must be transmuted into empire building, into the gym, into the business.
It cannot be wasted on parasocial OnlyFans relationships or endless internet pornography, which he views as a pacifier designed to keep men docile.
Okay, I have to step in here and really push back on Riker's logic, because there seems to be a massive, glaring contradiction in his advice to young men.
Let's hear it.
On one hand, Riker is fiercely telling men to build real, tangible wealth. He's telling them to forge ironclad, monk-like discipline through dopamine austerity. He wants them to be real builders.
Right.
But on the other hand, in the exact same section, he's outlining how to play into this digital mirage of rented Lambos, fake clout, and Instagram filters to attract women.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, if the goal is absolute reality and true sovereign power, why is he advising men to participate in an illusion? Why fake the Lambo if you were trying to be a real king?
It is a stark contradiction on the surface. But if you look closely at Riker's deeply cynical, almost Machiavellian view of Darwinian hypergamy, it makes a grim kind of sense.
Okay, how so?
Riker isn't saying the digital illusion is good. He isn't saying it's morally right. He is saying that it is the current terrain of the battlefield.
So it's pure, unfiltered pragmatism.
Exactly. You have to understand the terrain to survive it. He believes maintaining extreme internal discipline, what he calls treating pain like a currency, drawing heavily on the philosophies of figures like David Goggins or Jocko Willink, is the only way a man can shield his mind from the madness.
You build the internal iron so you aren't manipulated by the external algorithms.
So you project the digital clout because that's the only language the modern mating market speaks.
But internally, you remain completely detached. You know the Lambo is rented. You know the Instagram followers are a game. You play the game to acquire the biological resources, access to mates, but your true focus remains completely tethered to the real mission. Your legacy, your wealth, and your power.
You don't fall for your own marketing.
Wow. It's incredibly dark, but logically consistent within his framework. Which brings us to the climax of the book.
Yes, section 5.
After mapping out the entire matrix, the captured corporate institutions, the rigged family courts, the anti-male education system, and the digital dating illusions, Riker doesn't just leave men depressed. He lays out his ultimate solutions.
Exit strategies and becoming ungovernable.
This is where Riker moves from cultural diagnosis to radical, actionable prescription. He believes the system cannot be reformed. So he advocates for crisis capitalism, the creation of parallel networks, and a total systemic exit from mainstream society.
He starts with what he calls crypto conquest. He drops the fascinating stat that 88% of global digital nomads are men.
These are guys who work remotely from laptops anywhere in the world.
He shares anecdotes of guys who have fully embraced this. Like, he talks about a guy named Mike who runs a massive e-commerce business from a balcony in Bali, Indonesia.
Mike is physically and legally far out of reach of Western family courts or HR departments.
Or Dave, the guy going through the brutal divorce. Dave kept all of his wealth in a cryptocurrency cold wallet, a physical USB drive holding complex cryptographic keys.
Right.
Riker describes Dave keeping his wealth completely safe and invisible from divorce subpoenas, while his furious ex-wife's lawyer fruitlessly scours his Venmo history and bank statements looking for assets to seize.
Riker codifies this escape into what he calls the 3D rule. This serves as a binding constitutional clause for his followers.
The 3D rule.
The 3Ds are disengage from gynocentric systems, defy their moral shaming, build sovereign alternatives.
And when he says build sovereign alternatives, he isn't just speaking metaphorically about making a new group chat. He points to physical, real-world examples, like Liberty Ranch in Montana.
Liberty Ranch is wild. It's a 300-acre crypto-anarchist utopia.
300 acres?
Yeah, it's a massive compound where men go to learn blacksmithing, marksmanship, and sustainable agriculture. And the kicker, they exchange goods and services entirely in silver bullion and cryptocurrency, completely bypassing the Federal Reserve, the IRS, and the modern banking system.
But he doesn't just want guys moving to the woods. He wants them to use cutting-edge technology to subvert the system. The technological subversion he proposes is frankly brilliant, if legally terrifying.
He advocates for drafting smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain for absolutely everything.
Let's explain this for the listener who might not be a crypto expert. A smart contract is basically self-executing computer code living on a decentralized blockchain.
Right.
If condition A is met, action B happens automatically, without a bank or a judge needing to approve it.
Right. And Riker wants men to use this for business deals, dispute resolutions, and even child custody and alimony arrangements. His mantra in this chapter is, code is law now. The blockchain never asks for your pronouns.
He wants men to completely bypass the feminist family courts by locking their agreements in immutable code.
If a business partner or a spouse violates the terms of the agreement, the smart contract automatically locks the funds or transfers the assets.
There's no judge to appeal to, no bias to endure. The code executes coldly and fairly.
He also highlights the creation of parallel media networks. He points to the Honey Badger Brigade, a men's rights group that reached 12,000 Patreon subscribers simply by refusing to apologize or ban so-called problematic speech.
Riker uses this to prove a market reality. Men will eagerly, aggressively fund unfiltered alternative networks that operate outside of corporate HR terms of service.
If you build a platform where men can speak freely, they will throw money at it.
He extends the strategy of bypassing the system into the workplace with what he calls AI prompt foo.
This was my favorite anecdote in the book, Cousin Ted.
Cousin Ted, yeah. Ted is a corporate lawyer. Or he was. Instead of grinding out 80-hour weeks in a high-stress firm, Ted realized he could outsource 90% of his legal briefs, contract reviews, and research to advanced AI models.
He automated his entire white-collar job, allowing him to basically retire at 40. Now he spends his time trolling on a yacht in the Mediterranean while the AI does the work.
Riker views the future as belonging to these kinds of men. He calls them crisis capitalists, mercenaries who exploit the chaos of collapsing institutions, leveraging AI and crypto to enrich themselves, rather than acting like martyrs trying to save a system that hates them.
Riker isn't just telling men to unplug from the Matrix. He's telling them to steal the hardware and build their own servers.
But this makes me think of a historical example he uses right at the end of the book, which I found totally jarring.
Which one?
Riker mentions Pope Gregory VII, specifically the Pope's celibacy decree in the year 1074.
Yes, the mandate that all Catholic priests must remain celibate.
Right. Riker calls this an anti-distraction protocol. He argues that by forcing priests to remain single, Pope Gregory built a 1.3 billion follower empire because his men had no custody battles, no nagging wives, and no alimony to worry about.
All their biological energy was directed into building the church.
So my question is Riker seriously suggesting that modern men should entirely boycott society and women, take a vow of celibacy, and isolate themselves just to build their own empires?
If we look at the overarching philosophy here, Riker is tapping into a very deep economic and sociological concept called honor economics.
Honor economics.
He isn't necessarily advocating for universal monk-like celibacy for every man, though he respects it as a tactical option. What he is fiercely advocating for is a shift from voice to exit.
Voice versus exit. Break that down for us. What does that mean for the guy listening to this on his commute?
Voice is complaining. Voice is trying to steer a sinking ship. It's writing angry tweets about woke culture. It's petitioning the government for men's rights. It's arguing with HR about fairness.
Complaining, basically.
Yeah. Riker thinks voice is a complete waste of time, energy, and testosterone. He views it as a fundamentally beta trait, asking the system for permission to exist.
So what is the alternative?
Exit is the alpha strategy. Exit means quietly, ruthlessly withdrawing your capital, your labor, and your participation from corrupt systems.
You don't argue with the HR department. You automate your job with AI and start a sovereign business.
You don't argue with the family court judge. You hold your assets in an anonymous cold wallet. You enforce deals via handshakes, honor networks, and blockchain, rather than state courts.
It's about starving the beast by removing yourself from its menu.
Exactly. His ultimate goal isn't just personal survival, it's legacy engineering. He wants men to build wealth, develop hardened tribal networks, and consolidate power so that when the mainstream society collapses under the weight of its own inefficiency, which he views as inevitable, these parallel brotherhoods are the only ones left standing to rebuild civilization.
Man, it is an intensely dark, hyper-pragmatic, unapologetic view of the future. We have covered an incredible amount of ground today, from the raw biological imperatives of Shenzhen drone builders to the financial castration of modern divorce courts, all the way to Ethereum-based custody battles and crypto utopias in Montana.
It is a polarizing, fiercely debated text, and honestly, we've only scratched the surface of the raw strategies Riker lays out.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you view this book as a necessary survival manual for men in a hostile age, or a dystopian warning about the fracturing of society, it's undeniably shaping the conversation in the manosphere right now.
Absolutely. And remember, you have only heard a fraction of the arguments, the data points, and the survival tactics in this book.
You got to read it to get the full scope.
Yeah, if you want the full picture, if you want to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured, we strongly urge you to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy Master the Future by Conrad Riker.
It's worth the read.
And make sure you follow the author at Conrad and Riker on Substack for his daily tactical updates.
And please make sure to like and subscribe to our deep dive if you got value out of this thorough breakdown.
Before we sign off, I want to leave the listener with something to chew on.
There is one massive implication of Riker's worldview that the book points toward but leaves hanging in the air.
Lay it on us.
If Riker's vision of fully decentralized, AI-driven, crypto-funded parallel brotherhoods actually comes to pass, well, if millions of the most competent, high-testosterone men simply exit the system, what happens to the nation-state? Does the ultimate red pill eventually lead to the complete dissolution of national borders, replaced entirely by digital, tribal empires run by men who refuse to be governed?
Something to think about. Until next time.